Reprogram Your Mind for Positive Thinking with Soundtracks by Jon Acuff. So the theme for this week is the soundtrack of your mind. So let me set this up. Got a few things here, and then Pooki's going to jump in. Are you ready for this conversation?
I sure am.
There's a little side story here. I don't know, about 10 years ago, we were going to Nashville, and I have a good friend I've known for many years. His name is David Hooper, and he said, hey, I'm going to set up, how about if I set up a meetup for you guys since you're in town? And he chose this venue, like a cafe, and he invited a bunch of people. And remember that little soiree? We met a number of people that night, including like Rick Barker, who used to be
fun. Taylor
Swift's manager in her earlier years of her career, and some other folks. And that was a lot of fun. And then I think a few days later, we might have had dinner or something with David and his wife. And I remember this night he said, oh, did you get a chance to meet Jon Acuff? And I went, wait, who? Jon Acuff? I said, that rings a bell. And I realized that he had, at the time, had maybe one or two books out. But this was a guy who worked for Dave Ramsey, who's the guy like the radio talk show host who has all this books out on finances. But anyway, this Jon, he worked for Dave for a number of years, but then he had these aspirations to go out on his own and be his own speaker and author. And he's had a number of books out. But one of them is called Soundtracks, and I did get the audiobook to it, and it's about basically positive thinking, but I really like the way that he compared it to music. And there's a lot of musical references, and we're going to talk about some of the highlights from that book, and then maybe add some additional music-related things. So basically, let's just talk about the role that music plays in our lives. Like a few weeks ago, we did a thing about the frequency, the power of music specifically. That's not what this is about. It's about the inner self-talk, but how it compares to music and its effect on our lives. So we all know that we've heard that music is the soundtrack of our lives, right? So when you think back on like highlights, like emotional highlights, highs and lows of your life, whatever songs you were listening to at the time tend to stick with you. And when you hear those songs, they bring back those emotions, right? Bring back those memories. They take you back. And so we know the power that music has to connect with our emotions. Also, there's a term, I don't know, called earworms. This is where like a song gets kind of stuck in your head. And when I interviewed Karen Drucker, who if you may or may not be familiar with her, but was a prominent artist, still is, in the sort of new thought, spiritual, positive music realm. She was an early pioneer, actually, has multiple albums out. And I interviewed her once, and I was asking her about like what is most satisfying about that type of music, and she talked about earworms. Like a lot of her songs became earworms that people sing to themselves. I think we have the same approach. We want you to be singing those choruses to yourself. You know, I welcome joy into my life. It's time to wake up to happiness, you know. And so that's another aspect where that song gets stuck in your head. Sometimes it could be a song that's like a jingle or something that I can't stop thinking about this.
To all be faithful.
Yes, but don't even go there now. So I am stuck on Band-Aids, you know. That's why they use music jingles, because they want it to get stuck in your head. So songs have that ability to get on a loop and repeat themselves. And so let's compare that inner dialogue to the soundtrack of our lives. And we'll talk about playlists and soundtracks. So I know that when we were packing to come here, you know, we spent a few hours packing Thursday and loading up the car and all that.
Hours.
And I have this, I have different playlists, but there's one like a smooth jazz playlist that it's kind of good for just doing stuff like cleaning the house or packing or whatever. And I just turned that on and it played for hours. And it's something that I go to whenever I need something like that, just some kind of energy in the room. And I'm becoming more and more familiar with those songs because it's the same songs on the playlist. And I find myself humming along with these songs, you know. Similarly, our minds work the same way with our thought patterns, right? We get stuck in these loops. And some of them are empowering, you know, if they serve you. But often these loops do not serve us, right? And so they're the earworms of mental earworms, if you will. And so what we're going to encourage you to do is come up with a new positivity playlist. So here are some lessons from Jon's book, Soundtracks, that I just wanted to cover. Anything you want to say about just how I've set the stage here?
No, I'm really curious to see where you're going to keep going with this.
Okay. I got like 3 lessons from Jon's book.
Okay.
So one is you can stop the negative thinking patterns, because those are the ones that we're really worried about. We want to keep the ones that empower us. There's definitely inner self-talk that I
want
have.
to pump those up.
Like when it comes to being a musician or being a writer, or my ability to speak and do affirmations, I say I'm really good at this stuff. I think that serves me, and I have confidence in those areas, and so I'm going to continue to play those on a loop. But other things, and I'm going to use an example here in just a moment. But so Jon suggests that you ask 3 questions when you become aware of a negative thinking pattern or some specific type of idea that is on repeat. First thing you ask is it true? Is it helpful? And is it kind? Those are the 3 words. Let's just go through them. Is it true? I mean, you can just say blanketly, no, it's not true, and often that is the case. However, there might be some aspects of it that are. I'll just use a personal example here. So there's aspects of managing money that I struggle with. And so I could tell myself something like, I am horrible at managing my personal finances. And that sometimes is something that I say to myself. Like when it comes time to do taxes and come up with all the numbers and the expenses, I refer to it as a nightmare. So this is something that has been repeated in my mind. But if I was to ask myself, is it true that I'm horrible at managing? Well, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to like keeping records of what goes in and out, like detailed records, I fall short. I could be better in those areas. So there's some aspect of it that's true. I could probably engage a CPA or whatever. So I'm going to acknowledge the things that maybe are true about it. But in the general sense, am I horrible with personal finances? No. I mean, our monthly expenses, I'm good at staying on top of bills, and there's a lot of automated things that go on where our needs are met. I keep track of what comes in on a monthly basis. It's maybe the other aspects of it where I fall short. So no, it's not true that I'm horrible at. I'm actually very responsible in some areas. You just got to do an honest appraisal. Is it true? So that's one step. Would you agree? Kind of be honest with yourself, because we're not perfect, and there are areas that we could shore up.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So in your terms, what is something that you tell yourself on a regular basis? Ask yourself, is it true? The other question is it helpful? Is saying this to myself helping me? Is it helping
with your taxes?
Is it helping other people to continue to have this on my soundtrack, on this loop?
Yeah. Is it helping your attitude?
Yeah. And most likely the answer will be no. Continuing to have the same conversation in my own head is not helpful. And so that's another way to just to dissolve it and put it in its place. And then the next one is it kind? And I love this question here. Is this something you would tell a friend or a loved one? Would you say you're horrible at managing money?
Yeah. I know there's people out there that would say that.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully you're not one of those kind of
like your
people.
mom. Your mom will say stuff like that to you, or your dad, or
But would you say that to them? Since for the most part, we are much more crueler to ourselves, harder on ourselves than we are on other people.
Yeah, most of the things that we say to ourselves, we would never say to another. We would object harshly if we heard them say it to themselves.
Yeah. And so I think those are great ways to put those patterns in their proper place. Is it true? Is this helpful? Is this helping me and others to continue to repeat this? Or is it kind? Would I say this to someone that I really cared about and wanted to help? So have the same kindness toward yourself as you have to someone that you love and admire. All right, cool. 2 is to get awesome new soundtracks. There are 2 things that you can do. And one is to invert the old soundtracks. And so how do you create new ones? You flip it upside down. So what is the opposite? What's a negative thought that you've had in your life?
Oh, yeah, like I'm not worthy.
I'm not worthy of anything in particular?
Yeah, I don't deserve it. Yeah. I don't deserve to be happy.
So that was one that used to be an ongoing. And so obviously the opposite of that would be what?
Oh, I deserve to be happy.
And it may feel, again, authentic at first, but you need to start flipping the script, I guess. Yeah. So what's the opposite of that? Flip it upside down. Take that song and make it the opposite. If it's a heavy metal song, make it a ballad or a lounge song or something,
Well, yeah. I had a horrible soundtrack when I didn't love myself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was an awful one.
And it was on repeat, right?
Yeah, it was on repeat, and there was no music. It was like an audio book.
Yeah. Again, we're not talking about literal songs in your mind, but how they relate to soundtracks and playlists.
Yeah.
And in the old days, it was mixtapes, right? You make a mixtape for somebody, and you chose it for them, or you make one for yourself to play in the car. So one way is to take those negative thoughts and just flip them. What's the opposite of that? And then play those as your new anthem on, and put them on repeat until you start realizing it and start feeling it. At first, it may seem inauthentic, but I think there's some value to just acting as if,
I'm sure you felt it with affirmations before, like where you're stretching to say that affirmation, like you're not really embodying it in your life and you're stretching. So these will be stretches for you.
Yeah.
But we have to reprogram our thinking, our brains, our thoughts, because our thoughts are what's creating our feelings, and our feelings are what are creating our behaviors. And so it's really, really, really important to begin to root them out, acknowledge them. Like, is it true? Acknowledging it. Maybe parts of it are true. How much of it can you own? And then how much of it can you just let go of?
Right.
Release. It's not yours. And then, is it helpful? Is it helpful to me? So these are important. First thing that happens is you stop listening to the old soundtrack and you start listening to new stuff, but it gets kind of quiet in there. And then there comes that part where you start your own soundtrack, your new soundtrack that has all these positive, powerful statements. And I would say if you can put them to a melody or music, even more powerful.
Yeah, I would actually listen to literal music, like we've got lots of it, a growing amount of it.
But if you can sing your affirmations, even more powerful.
Yeah. So flip whatever the message is that you're repeatedly telling yourself that's not serving you, flip it to the opposite. Another thing is borrow from others. And so that's like, basically, you can listen to my affirmations. That's a great example of borrowing from others. You can seek out quotes from people that you admire that empower you, from speeches. And so to me, the musical parallel here is like doing a cover song. And so until you find your own affirmations, do other people's material. Look up my affirmations. Okay. Do Google searches for empowering things related to the particular topic that you might be struggling with or you want to replace, and use those.
Yeah.
In fact, that's a lot of how art is created. In fact, everything that I do in the creative realm, I started off kind of mimicking people that I admired until I found my own voice within it. But I started off going, I like the way they do that song, or the way he or she writes. I'm going to do a similar...
Or how they paint.
Yeah, I'm not going to plagiarize them. I'm going to be inspired by that style. Yeah, I've done it with art, with visual art. But over time, you develop your own voice and your own style. And so you could do the same thing with these soundtracks. I love this one, too. This is really important because a lot of people will beat themselves up when they continue to have negative thoughts, once they do this kind of work. But he says, turn down the dial. The goal is not to switch off the negative thoughts once and for all, be gone, forever be gone. The goal is to turn down the volume, because the voice will never go away. Successful people, no matter how long you do this work, you're still going to have those little things that come up and go, what are they going to think of you? You're going to embarrass yourself. What happens if this fails? That's never going to go away. But you learn to turn the dial down on that, turn the volume up on the things that serve you. Another great musical reference there, the audio reference.
Absolutely. People
leave comments on my YouTube videos a lot saying, I've been doing this stuff for months and negative stuff is still happening, or I still think a negative thought, and they think they're a failure. No, you're not. Again, you're just switching your focus and what is going to have prominence. You stop giving that thing a microphone and a bullhorn. It just turn it down, and replace it with something else. That's the whole thing, is to replay. You have a new soundtrack, a new playlist, a new mixtape that's going to serve you best.
And it's not going to happen overnight.
No.
Those soundtracks weren't created in 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. This is a part, of the journey, is to just be aware, pay attention when the negative thoughts come up, have a response to that. I just basically, when I have a negative thought come up, I'm like, I see you. Okay. Wow. What's going on with me right now that thought would come up?
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, well, it's not true. Because usually it's some weird ego thing in my mind, like, don't do that. People are going to look like a fool. It's not true. But I used to just listen to it. I never had anything. There was never anything that I did after it spoke. Now when it speaks, I'm like, I see you. Yeah, sorry, we're not listening to that. That's from that's the soundtrack of my past. I'm done with that. See, I got new tunes in this front seat. You sit in the back seat. I'm playing new tunes on this radio in the front seat, and you just listen to my new tunes.
Be quiet back there and eat some snacks.
Hush on up. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's right.
And then the third thing from Jon's book that I wanted to highlight here, and this is something new. I rarely have heard this before, like in positive thinking type of material, but he says use an item or an image as a symbol to remind you of your new soundtracks and something in the physical world that can help make them stick. And so the music parallel here, I don't think he makes this comparison in his book, but I think of this as like going to a concert and you have a great experience, and so you go home with the T-shirt, or you go home with the CD, even though you may not even own a CD player, but it becomes like a symbol of that experience. So every time you see it, or every time you wear that shirt, it reminds you of that good feeling that you had when you attended that concert. So in the same way, is there a symbol? Is there some object? Is there a piece of art or something that you can connect with these new soundtracks that will be in the physical world? And I'll just share a couple with me over the years. When we visit different places, I will find like a little stone or something, and we bring them home. But there's two of them in particular that I've used for many years when I meditate. One I picked up, just a small little white stone that I picked up on a beach in Hawaii from like 10, 12 years ago when we were there. And there's another like dark, smooth stone that I picked up in Door County when we were in Wisconsin also several years ago. One of them I refer to, the white one from Hawaii, I refer to as the prosperity stone. And the darker, smooth, kind of heavier, solid one is my stability stone. So I hold one in each hand when I meditate, when I'm at home. But those are my, like, there's an example of
touchstones.
That's a good word, touchstones. Of a symbol that I use that reminds me of what I'm focusing on, prosperity and stability, And so what's it for you? It could be a crystal, it could be a feather, it could be a piece of art, a photo, anything, yeah. So have that item or symbol in the tangible real world that reminds you of that new soundtrack. And then final note, just like anything, we kind of mentioned this earlier, you can have these are great ideas. A soundtrack without action is just like a fortune cookie that you read.
It's a list.
Yeah, that's nice. It might be catchy, it might be clever, but until you put it into action, it won't fully serve you.
So you start grooving to the soundtrack, singing the songs.
That's right. So put these into action.